but I can tell you that, it's terrible. Representative Omar tried to downplay it, said, oh, it was very, it was very tough to know how this money should be used.
Yeah.
She was gaslighting the American people.
Well, we'll talk to her.
Yeah, but when you come to this country, you got to learn which side of the road to drive on. You got to learn to stop at stop signs, and you got to learn not to defraud the American people.
Well, there are plenty of criminal behavior from communities well beyond the immigrant community.
That's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent laying out the kind of blunt truth Democrats hate hearing on national TV by spelling out exactly how Minnesota's fraud scandal spiraled out of control while anti-American hacks like Ilhan Omar do everything in their power to dismiss it and play the victim. Welcome to Nerk News, I'm Nerkish, and it looks like Democrats are scrambling again as this Minnesota scandal keeps exposing just how deep the rot goes, because every new detail makes it clearer that this wasn't some harmless oversight. It was a massive breakdown enabled by people who refuse to demand assimilation or accountability. I mean, when taxpayer dollars end up overseas while politicians pretend nothing happened, people start paying attention. Here's Scott Bessent explaining exactly what unfolded and why it matters to an incredulous Margaret Brennan.
Before I let you go, I want to ask you about this massive fraud out in Minnesota in the state welfare program. It has been under federal investigation since all the way back in 2022. The president told you, though, this week to look into Somalis who, quote, ripped off that state for billions of dollars. He said they contribute nothing. What exactly are you investigating?
Well, Margaret, to be clear, the initial fraud that was discovered by the IRS, for which I'm the acting commissioner, is discovered by IRS Criminal Investigations Unit. This was not an endogenous thing that the state of Minnesota decided we had to go in and clean up the mess for them, and this is part of the continued cleanup. A lot of money has been transferred from the individuals who committed this fraud, including those who donated to the governor, donated to Representative Omar, and donated to A.G. Ellison. But they've been transferred to something called MBSs. And those are...
Mortgage-backed security? What do you mean?
Sorry?
Transferred to what?
These are money the Bureau services, and they are wire transfer organizations that are outside the regulated banking system. And that money has gone overseas. And we are tracking that both to the Middle East and to Somalia to see what the uses of that have been.
You know, Bessent is absolutely right here. This was hundreds of millions in fraud, committed by networks that funneled cash out of Minnesota and into foreign spheres Omar openly prioritizes. I mean, she's the one who went around telling crowds she was Somali first. So her pretending to act shocked now doesn't land. Bessent's point about assimilation is something Trump allies have highlighted for years. You follow the laws, you respect taxpayers, and you don't treat America like an ATM. Here's Omar responding by blaming everyone except the people who stole the money.
It's disgusting. It's completely disgusting. These are Americans that he is calling garbage. And we feel like there is an unhealthy obsession that he has on the Somali community, and an unhealthy and creepy obsession that he has with me. I think it is also really important for us to remember that this kind of hateful rhetoric and this level of dehumanizing can lead to dangerous actions by people who listen to the president. I mean, when I think about Stephen Miller and his white supremacist rhetoric, it reminds me, yes, it reminds me of the way the Nazis described Jewish people in Germany. And, you know, as we know, there have been many immigrants who have tried to come to the United States who've turned back, one of them being Jewish immigrants. We know the way that people were described who were coming from Ireland, Irish immigrants. We know the way in which people were described back then when they were Italian immigrants. And to me, you know, we're yes, of course, ethnically Somali. We are in this country as Americans. Yeah. We are citizens. We are productive part of this nation, and we will continue to be.
87 people charged, all but 8 are of Somali descent. And that has added to the spotlight being put specifically on your community. Why do you think this fraud was allowed to get so widespread?
Well, I want to say, this also has an impact on Somalis because we are also taxpayers in Minnesota. We also could have benefited from the program and the money that was stolen. And so it's been really frustrating for people to not acknowledge the fact that we're also, as Minnesotans, as taxpayers, really upset and angry about the fraud that has occurred.
Omar's shifting blame to the FBI and the courts is exactly the kind of deflection people have come to expect. She centers Somalis as the victims while ignoring how American taxpayers were the ones robbed, and I mean calling Stephen Miller a white supremacist for expecting basic assimilation is the kind of manufactured outrage she relies on. This was a $250 million fraud that thrived in the very environment she helped create. Open borders, no standards, and a refusal to acknowledge how unassimilated networks exploited the system.
And I interpret that for you. I'll translate. He's saying no excuses here.
No excuses, and especially when it was actually some of the defendants' lawyers who said it was like they were filling the cookie jar up, and like they knew people were stealing out of the cookie jar, and they just kept refilling it and refilling it and refilling it. And I think Scott Bessent makes an important point there. We love immigrants who come to this country, but we need an assimilation process. We need a fervor. You could have your own culture, that's fine. But a fervor for the American dream, a love for this country, an appreciation for taxpayer dollars, an appreciation for the values that bind us together despite our different cultures, backgrounds, languages, etc. I think that's an important point you've heard Bessent make, Stephen Miller as well.
I think you know Stephen Miller well.
Yeah, I mean, he accuses Stephen of being a Nazi. Stephen's Jewish, first of all. Stephen's a great person. Stephen's someone who loves this country and is working hard for it. And Stephen and his family have been totally and completely under fire and accosted with all kinds of threats for doing what they're doing. It was the day after Charlie Kirk's assassination that Katie Miller was stormed by someone outside of her home who said, "I'm watching you." There were wanted signs up by their home in Virginia accusing him of crimes against humanity. They have been under threat. And as Stephen Miller said, it's an organized campaign of dehumanization, vilification. And that's what this is. It's organized. They're being called Nazis. It's just not Ilhan Omar. It is others too. And it is shameful rhetoric that should be toned down.
Every time Omar is cornered on something, like massive fraud exposed in her own district, she scrambles to cast herself as the victim instead of addressing what actually happened. I mean, the moment real accountability shows up, she pivots to outrage over tone or language while ignoring the networks in Minnesota that abused welfare programs she championed. Republicans keep zeroing in on the same point. Americans expect immigrants to assimilate, respect the country, and protect taxpayer dollars, not exploit the system and then deflect when it's exposed. But let me know what you think. Should politicians who openly reject assimilation be held responsible when fraud thrives in their districts? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. That stuff really does help us out. Until then, this has been Nerk News. Thanks for watching. Bye.